Alright, welcome back folks. It is Crazy Welder, and in today's video we're going to be going over Starcraft Ghost. I managed to get my hands on one of the pre-release versions that has been floating around for a while, and I'm actually running it on my more or less stock Xbox. There hasn't been too many mods done to it. As it turns out, there are kind of some missions that don't run unless you actually have 128 megs of memory on your Xbox, which, currently at this time I don't have. But however, with that said, I will be doing kind of a mod to my Xbox to allow me to actually play and finish the rest of the levels, as well as kind of a tutorial on how to do basically just that. Now, one of the things that you'll notice when we're playing this is that you won't actually get all of the 6 missions in the game unless you actually use the profile named Nova. Now, for some folks, the profile comes preloaded, for some it does not, but that's just something to keep in mind. Also, I'll be doing kind of a separate video where I'll be going over how to unlock the 7th mission, which you just need to basically comment out of one of the files in the game.
Nova, I have an incoming transmission from Colonel Hollow. Stand by.
You've done well, though. Now that the Terrazine has shut off, the Zerg have become even more erratic. For the time being, I need you to support our defense forces on the ground. Chimera base lies just over the ridge. It's been taking a beating. Once you hit the ground, report to the forward post to see if you can help take some of the heat off.
No problem, sir. I've got it covered.
Alright, so here we are in the kind of 3rd mission, I believe, that you're able to actually play. It doesn't exactly run super great, but again, this was a pre-release build that was never actually supposed to see the light of day. So with that said, we don't have a whole lot of everything. Now, in my kind of short research that I've done over the course of looking into StarCraft Ghost, I've seen that there's a bunch of different builds. There are some builds dating as far back as, at least 2002 that we have seen playable, that have the health bar be a bunch of little separate bars. Then there's this sort of 2003, 2004 build that we're seeing here, which has this sort of layout. And then, finally, kind of going after this build was the 2005 build that was ultimately, I believe, displayed at the BlizzCon or one of the game shows where people actually got to play the multiplayer build. Now, interesting part here is the marine models, as you can see, are not exactly the highest quality, and that may just be due to the fact that the assets being used here are indeed from a much older build of the game. Well, let's take a look at some of the stuff that you're able to do in here. So you take out your rifle by pressing Y, and then, ideally you basically kind of time this perfectly. I do have a little bit of lag due to the post-processing that I'm running on the game right now, but here we go. As you can see, still pretty glitchy here, but nonetheless you've got a bunch of different options for controlling Nova. You can go prone. I believe you can also do kind of side steps. You can also do kind of twirls to avoid attacks, etc. when you're actually aiming down sights. And you can also go into full scope mode, as well as lean and move as you're kind of aiming with the sight, which is pretty cool. I believe that there are sort of other weapons available, and I guess your pistol also has a magnification option as well. The pistol is decently powerful, I suppose, but not really the best. You also have frag grenades that you can toss. Those are pretty useful against like large swarms of Zerg, but I haven't really encountered them just yet, so I'm going to probably just continue for now. Again, Nova can do various kind of different moves. She can also do dodge moves while crouching as well, so pretty cool. And then if you also press left on the D-pad, you can fully cloak, and later on in the game you also get additional kind of features such as the ability to speed up and the sight or thermal goggles, which I'm guessing just activate the goggles that she has on top of her head. I'm not sure why you don't get them early on, but you do get them at certain portions later in the game. I also believe this is the build that actually has kind of full physics on the bodies when you drag them around, but I don't believe that it actually takes effect when you just sort of do it normally, meaning if you just kill one of the grunts, I don't believe that the physics actually take place, and I'm not sure if that's just something to do with this build or the way that it's activated, but as it stands, you know, that's just how it is. So, you know, you gotta take heed of the fact that this is a really old game, you know, really old build as well, so you can't really have everything that you want. Now, I believe the 2005 build actually has a different model for Nova. This one's kind of one of the, you know, one of the older builds, so again, we're not going to have the most high definition models, certainly not for the Marines, and I kind of missed some stuff there, but that's okay, we'll come back to those later on, and hopefully be able to get this just right. I have to kind of time it in a way that it takes advantage of the lag that I'm experiencing here. Now, going through some of the game files, I actually noticed that you have the ability to also call down nukes and EMPs, or at least you would be able to later on in the game. I don't think that we can quite do so, you know, in this version of the game, or at least not that I've seen so far. We may still kind of, you know, see that later on potentially. I'm not entirely sure. Nonetheless, it's just so really cool to be able to play this, because this, you know, is a game that I was really looking forward to for a long time back when it was still announced, and especially I remember watching all the trailers and all the gameplays that were released by IGN and, you know, a lot of the other kind of various studios at the time. I believe GameSpot had a bunch of separate videos on this as well. So really awesome just being able to actually finally play this. Unfortunately, as I said, because I don't have the full modified Xbox, I'm not able to take advantage of you know, seeing all of the levels kind of firsthand, but I'm guessing that once I do get that modded, I'll actually be able to experience this fully. Now, you can actually play this game on the CXBX emulator if you have a powerful enough CPU. I have a Ryzen 7 3700X, I believe, and it's not really enough for that emulator, and the emulator is not really the most efficient at this point in time, so I can't really run it too well, and it's also still kind of buggy, so some lighting effects on the suit, for example, don't work. Probably if you have a Threadripper or you know, one of the, you know, more powerful Ryzen processors like a Ryzen 9, you could probably get away with running the game on the emulator at decent frame rates. But the other way to play this is if you have the 1.4 gigahertz CPU modded Xbox. That'll also allow you to have you know, better frame rates and stuff in this as well. So without kind of seeing the lag that we're seeing here, I'm easily dropping into the teens, you know, with this particular build. There may be other builds that are floating around out there. As far as I recall, there was a first leak back in 2016, and then there was this leak in 2020. Ultimately, that was the second kind of version, and that, you know, I'm not sure if there's a big difference there as far as those two levels are concerned, but or two releases are concerned, but this is the one that I have in particular, and, you know, it seems to be kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different kind of levels here. I don't know if all of them are, you know, playable on all different Xboxes. My Xbox is a 1.3 and it's been soft modded, so I have the ability to actually run this, because I'm assuming that this particular model was unsigned, and I completely forgot to take my weapon out, so I'm going to see if my buddy here is going to help me out with that guy. He might not though, so we'll see if that Zerg actually comes my way. Little Zergling here, and I guess it just decided to run away. But nonetheless, so you do have this sort of automatic sniper, I guess. I'm not sure, maybe this is the canister rifle or the gauze rifle. I keep forgetting which one this one actually is. But nonetheless, very cool rifle. The aiming is a little bit slow, and I'm not sure if that's to do with the controls, but I may end up modifying that later on if I get the chance. But definitely very laggy, these sort of levels here. And in terms of overall poly count, it's hard to tell if it's sort of on par with what you would have seen, you know, with Xbox games at the time. I would imagine it's probably, you know, kind of dialed down, because this was supposed to run on the GameCube and PS2 at the time of this build, until I believe it went to Swingin' Ape Studios, at which point they pretty much, I think, locked it down to PS2 and Xbox, because again, those are the consoles that actually had online capabilities. I don't believe that the GameCube had sort of any online options at that time. I know at some point they released some kind of LAN capability for the GameCube with a sort of separate separate adapter that you could buy. But again, I don't remember everything off the top of my head now. It's been a really long time since since those days, so I can't really remember all of these details specifically. But with that said, there are definitely quite a few different versions of this build that have been out there. Not every one of them got released. This one, it seems, like I said, has had 2 separate kind of releases here and there, which is pretty neat. My particular Xbox, as I said, is not really the most powerful, so don't expect fantastic performance here. I'm going to try and also get the 1.4 gig Xbox to see if if we can't potentially get it to play a little bit nicer with this hardware. As I said before, my Xbox, while modified, it's still pretty much mostly stock, so not really a whole lot of capability to run everything at full blast, essentially. And I seem to be running out of ammo, so I'm probably going to end up having to punch these guys as I go through here. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to survive, fighting these dudes here. Maybe, but probably not going to do too well here. Let's see if I can actually just run away. I don't think it's going to let me. Oh, actually, I guess I do have some pistol rounds that I've picked up now. Unfortunately, it's not really super easy to be able to aim with this particular setup that I have right here. But at least you do have the ability to, use your melee weapons. This actually kind of reminds me of that opening to Starcraft Brood War, where the Marine's kind of lying there and he points up, and then the dropship comes in to start taking care of all the issues with air support coming in and all that stuff. Pretty awesome. So potentially we might be able to use an SCV, or maybe we get onto a gun here. Let's see what happens. I haven't played this before. I've watched some of the gameplay videos on this, but I haven't had the chance to really take take a look at much. But actually, it's really cool to be able to see sort of this Zerg rush happening, in real time. Because normally, even in StarCraft 2, there are some mods where you can play as the ghosts, but it's not really playing. It's more like you're just kind of roaming around, because they've never really set up a mod that actually has a full version of a playable ghost where you can actually shoot stuff. I believe at one point somebody was actually working on it, but I don't recall if that ever got fully solved or fixed, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think they ever fully released the mod that actually allowed you to do that. It looked really cool. I actually at one point had some files for it, but they have long since been taken down or lost. I don't think I have that hard disk anymore that has that mod on there. But in any case, that was going to be released back in like 2000 and I want to say 11 or 2012 or something like that. It never kind of came to fruition. But there are some mods of different campaign or like role-playing campaigns where you can kind of get into the ghosts as Nova, and they use the cinematic model, so it's really cool because you're actually able to get in and take full advantage of that. I don't know if I can actually get into this thing. Probably not. Let's see. Yeah, so it probably won't let me get into this thing. So I'm guessing that I don't get to pilot the SCV because the action button is the B button. So let's see if... Oh, I guess I can probably use the gun, possibly. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so we do get to use the gun on the Zerglings. But they eventually end up... Oh, looks like they've got, what is that, an Ultralisk, I think? I honestly don't remember all of the unit names now. It's been so long. I don't really play StarCraft that much anymore, so I've kind of been out of the loop on, all the various, models and characters, etc. that they have. I guess I have to protect the SCV here, because otherwise it's going to get attacked. See, these Zerg just keep coming. Interesting. That Marine's face actually is a fairly high definition model, as is his armor, which I'm kind of wondering why they didn't use that for the other Marines. Because the other Marine models have really low poly armor suits, but this guy's seem to be, you know, a little bit better looking, or at least for his face. I'm not sure if the actual plate for his helmet is still low poly as the other Marines, but nonetheless, almost feels like you should just replace the Marine models with that one in particular. Now, perhaps the most interesting part here is just the amount of data that you can kind of glean from the various kind of folks that you know, are around in here. So you can see, you know, for one, you can kind of take a look at the rifles that they have in here. Now, interestingly enough, in this particular version, they don't have any information about the actual blade that Nova uses. In some of the kind of earlier videos that we've seen of gameplay for this particular game. So that's one thing that's kind of missing in here. But you can see, you know, this sort of canister rifle that she uses by default. Then of course they also talk about the sniper rifle as well. Now, this seems to be just part of her regular rifle mode in general, so, but interestingly enough, that's in here as well. Now you've got the sort of radiation or some kind of, you know, ray rifle that she's able to call down. Then there's the electromagnetic pulse, the arc-light missile strike, as well as the Yamato strike and the nukes. Of course, you have the frag canister, which is basically just, you know, a special kind of grenade that can essentially just, you know, fire at enemies, so like a fragmentation round. And then the other part is that you can kind of take a look at, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you actually look through some of the folks in here, they actually mention specters as well, which are basically kind of an upgraded ghost. And what I've managed to kind of understand from this is that the way that the story of the game was supposed to kind of go down is that you've got a group of rebels in here that are essentially taking over some of the kind of, you know, various sort of bits of the world that you are in as Nova. And it just so happens that one of the rebel leaders is, you know, the guy that happens to be essentially kind of making everything, you know, sketchy with the ghosts in general, because they're sort of making ghosts that are super powerful called specters, and there are a bunch of them within this sort of, you know, within this sort of world that you'll end up facing at one point, because if you actually look at some of the levels that, you know, happen to be in this game later on, you'll actually find that there's a mission called Spectre Fight. So, you know, it's sort of fair to say that at some point down the road, you're going to be actually facing off against these guys. So you can see the rebels in here, and one of the kind of folks that you end up dealing with is Vulcan. Potentially, he's, you know, sort of psionically enhanced. Then you also have, you know, yet another kind of ghost named Ares, who just happens to be, or Spectre, I should say, happens to be extremely proficient with a sniper rifle. And then you've also got Artemis as well. It just happens to be kind of another one of those Spectre operatives that you most likely end up, you know, going against at some point later on in the game. Not to mention that the Gehenna base, or whatever that thing ends up being called, just so happens to be one of those kind of things. And of course you have Hickson, who's the leader of said rebels. And so potentially, you know, that kind of explains some of the videos where you see a different color of the Terran Marines that Nova is taking down, which also explains why she's just kind of sneaking around behind their back, because ultimately what it seems to be leading up to is a face-off against the Spectres, and potentially Nova taking out this sort of rebel cell that has ended up kind of going against your regular Terran Dominion. So very cool stuff. It also seems that at least at some point you were supposed to be able to use a speeder bike, as that's something that's been shown off in the videos before. You've also got, of course, you know, the Goliaths, which, you know, you probably either see in combat or potentially get to pilot. I believe, if I recall correctly, some of the multiplayer footage that was shown off actually included pilotable Goliaths. You know, of course, you've seen the Firebats, which, you know, for the most part just go around torching stuff. Again, this was shown in a lot of the previous videos from the gameplay of the game. And of course you've got the siege tanks, which of course are, you know, pretty much universally known by just about everyone. And you do get to see these in the game, but also you ultimately potentially get to pilot them at some point later on, if the campaign had been expended upon. As you know, currently it has not been, but nonetheless, this is just, you know, some of the stuff that you get to look at in here. Interestingly enough, there are also, you know, a bunch of different spots on the Zerg. Specifically, you can see that while they include a bunch of the basic kind of, you know, folks in here, you can see that there are also characters that potentially you get to interact with at a certain point, you know, in the game levels. Not all of them end up having an actual kind of 3D model of their face mapped. It seems to default to that Marine that walks around, but I believe at a certain point one of them does actually have a model that has been used for him. I don't remember which one it was. I keep kind of forgetting here, but nonetheless, you know, it seems like this would be one of the Zerg, or sorry, one of the Protoss that you would eventually be able to potentially see, or maybe even, you know, face off against. You know, there's one of those guys in here at some point. Now, I don't know if I'll actually be able to see it necessarily. I tried looking him up, but I'm not sure if we'll actually get to fully see his face. Probably not, I'm guessing, because it looks like they haven't really put that in here per se. I've gone through just about most of them, but you do get to see some of the units at the very least. So that's pretty cool. The Zerg forces, again, pretty basic stuff. They have a bunch of stuff that they kind of show you, but not all of them have a model kind of selected here, so you can only see a couple. Nonetheless, pretty cool because you do get to see some really awesome Zerg enemies in this. I don't know if you ever actually get to fight any of the Infested Terran Marines. They don't have a sort of 3D model for it in here. Potentially later on in the campaign you do, but I haven't been able to check that out personally. So hopefully I'll be able to get you know, my sort of modded Xbox during the summer. That way I'll be able to continue and play through these levels, and hopefully with some better frame rates in this game as well. And perhaps, you know, now that folks have had some time to dig into it a little bit, they'll be able to actually do some mods and make you know, make this a little bit more playable than it was even before. And if you guys like this video, again, just leave me a like.